Good morning, Mount Olive. It's time to talk history. This is one of those days when I feel like somebody threw me under the bus because talking about history has become very controversial because everybody's upset about who's teaching the history. What history are we teaching? We're going to talk about the history of Mount Olive. When it comes to Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church, we have been in existence since 1909. 14 pastors. Or is it 13 because one of them came back twice. So either 13 or 14 pastors. Thousands of members, thousands of visitors, thousands and thousands of people that this church touched. When it came to the history, we actually came from Second Baptist Church of Joliet. When 23 members of their church decided it's time for us to branch out. They met in January and determined we need a new church. I don't know who was on the committee to name the church, who was actually involved in all of those activities. But as I got ready to prepare for this morning's history lesson, I went back and looked at the names that I have read over and over and over again. They've always been there, but today I counted them. Then I looked at the names and I suddenly realized these aren't just names of the people that started this church. One of those names that immediately jumped out at me was Thomas Doherty. And I went, Mr. Doherty. Mr. Doherty ran the black cleaners across the street from Mount Olive on Chicago Street. Because he was always open for business, he had the church key. And anytime you needed access to the church and no one was there, you knew to go across the street to the cleaners. Mr. Doherty would give you the key. Or in the case of a lot of us, we just went up behind the counter, got the key, ran across the street, and we would actually be able to get into the church. From the inception of Mount Olive, they were involved in the community. But certain things continued to be part of their history. When it came to Mount Olive, one of the things that I found interesting was we used to have long, detailed meetings about carpet. One of the first series of meetings that I read about, they were discussing carpet back in the 1900s. Anybody that's been with us since we made our transition to this new building can tell you about the repeated meetings about carpet. So what's so biblical about carpet? I don't know, but we spend a lot of time talking about carpet when we really should be spending a lot of our time talking about our history. What's in that history? Who's in that history? It became very aware to me this morning. I'm one of that dirty dozen, the last 12, that actually have first-degree knowledge of that group of 23 that started this church. It is paramount that all of us pass that history along to all of you that are watching. You need to know your history. Rule 2, never let anybody else tell your history. As African Americans, we spend a lot of our time doing oral histories. When you are a people that often have to move in the middle of the night, move quickly, Run from the fear that you're going to be burned out. You need your history on your person, not a series of books, not a series of file cabinets that have to be taken with you. You've got to go, and it's got to go. So that means that history is there. This church had a lot of outreach. In World War I, we were getting started, and we survived through all of that. A lot of churches didn't. The Great Depression, we were there. We provided lots of programs for people when folks couldn't get a job, couldn't have a meal. That was the church's job. During World War II, everybody had to pitch in. We were there. We had a state-certified daycare program so that mothers could drop their babies off safely and make it to the arsenal so that they could make the shells that were going to win World War II. At the same time, Mount Olive kept the doors open. We were in the South Loop of Joliet, closest to the train station. And for lots of young men, as they were going off to war, they wanted to make sure that they were on the right side of God. And that meant they needed to be baptized. So we baptized anytime anybody came in and talked about, I need this before I go. So that pool was always open. And speaking of baptismal pools, because that's kind of a Baptist doctrine, it's one of the things that we base our religion on. When we started that first church and we had a revival, they took in a lot of members. And when you take in members, you have to baptize them. With that baptizing, we didn't have a pool at the time. But we used the pool at the First Baptist Church of Joliet. They shared with us. Our history has often been tied to First Baptist. First Baptist is no longer in existence. They, like many other people, have been relegated to the history book. But we spent lots of time with First Baptist. As the town grew and expanded and we were forced to leave our original, but not original home at 116 South Chicago Street, until we could get this edifice built, we had to have a temporary home. And our temporary home was back with First Baptist Church of Joliet. We learned to coexist. They had Sunday school in the classrooms, and we had our service in the sanctuary. Then we would switch. We would move from the sanctuary to the Sunday school classrooms for Sunday school, and they would come into the sanctuary for their service. When we were finally ready to move to this particular edifice, the fourth in the history of Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church of Joliet, we made that transition. We did Sunday school at First Baptist that morning. And now when we have a break between Sunday school and church service, we go to Fellowship Hall. You might have a cookie, you might drink some punch, or possibly some coffee. But on that particular Sunday, everybody put on their coats, everybody walked outside, we went and got in our cars, and Joliet's Finest was waiting for us. They began the parade. We made a left onto Eastern Avenue. We made a right onto Cass Street. We made another right onto Briggs Street. They were leading the procession. And then when we got to the interstate, Joliet's Finest dropped off, and Will County's Finest led us home as we made the left turn onto Carey Street. home in the cornfield. When you think about cornfields, wasn't that where Ruth and Naomi and so many other people spent their time? This isn't just a cornfield. This is God's field. And this is where we do God's work. We have memories. One of the memories, and we transition a lot of them because we like to keep stuff. I looked back, and many of you are very aware of the window that is the anchor of this sanctuary. That window was in building 3 when we moved into it in 1965. So my wedding pictures in 1970, that picture was there. When both of my daughters got married in this building, that window is there. When I said goodbye to my husband, that window was there. It'll be a piece that I'll always remember, but that's history. The good, the bad, and the ugly. But history must be told. All of our pastors have fond nicknames. I've decided Reverend Martin, whether he likes it or not, is going to have to be the COVID pastor. He prepared us for COVID long before anybody knew COVID was coming. He came in and said, we're going to do technology. You're going to do things that you haven't done before. So when we suddenly had to make that hard and fast decision a few marches ago, that this anniversary week was going to have to be shut it down week, and we spent so many weeks in homes, but we never lost our anchor. We could still reach Christ. We could still reach the people of Christ. We learned Facebook, YouTube, Zoom. That was how we got the message out. And what does it say? Go into the world and make all of those people aware of the goodness of God. That is our history. May you always remember your history. Tell your story. Tell your family. Tell your friends. Tell everybody of the goodness of God. May you all be blessed.